Oh, there we go. So I think there might be a couple of more people that are still going to show up in the next minute or two. But welcome to everybody. I will introduce myself if I haven't already known you before. My name is Neil Ripsky, and I started training in Chinese martial arts in the 1980s. I started with the Jing actually, and then as I grew up, I got really lucky and met a couple of really good teachers in my area. One of them was Chen Qiming, who was the master that I met in, I think it was 2002 or 2003. And he was my Shaolin 18 Lohan Palm teacher. He passed away just, is it 2 years ago? 2 years ago now. So I was very lucky. I was with him for about 20 years, pretty solidly, to the end of his life after he moved to Canada. And I was just kind of this random guy that found out he was a martial arts master. It's because he was a Chinese doctor in my area, and actually one of my kung fu brothers went to him as getting doctored, and I got this phone call on a Sunday afternoon. He's like, "Neil, you gotta meet this doctor I just met." So the story went that Daniel went in there, and of course he was getting treated for something, not martial arts related, but he had been in class, so he was all bruised up. His arms were all bruised. So Sifu was like, "Huh, are you a kung fu guy? Like those are kung fu bruises, right? Those are blocking things." And so the response of course, well, yeah, I practice all the time, blah blah blah. And he said that he taught a class every Sunday for his patients. So he ended up giving Daniel a quick impromptu little demonstration, I think. And I got the phone call that I should come and meet this cat. And luckily for me, even though I wasn't a patient and I wasn't there for medicine, he ended up taking me on as a student and later on as his disciple. So I was the only guy that was doing it as a sort of Buddhist training system. There was other students that were attending with me. Either they were patients or sometimes like there were other acupuncturists as well. So they're doing it as a medical system. So I ended up sort of getting this long established relationship with him. I was really lucky. But now, since he's passed on and I would like to share what he taught, I've been working on writing a book and I'm hoping to find people that are interested in the same sort of thing. So welcome. Sorry, there's a really noisy motorcycle here. So welcome. And if you have any questions, feel free to lay them on me here. I work best when people are interested and have something that they are trying to understand. So and what I was thinking we would do to get started, unless anybody has any questions right now for me. Silence. Okay. I thought that we would talk a little bit about verbiage, just because the first thing you got to do whenever you train with anybody is be able to speak the same language, right? And it doesn't matter that we all speak English. There's still dialectical barriers. And then martial arts, there's always the issue of how we actually interpret what the classics are saying to one another. So one of the big problem words is chi. So we're just going to start there. I try not to use the word chi until I sort of have to, because when somebody does use the word chi and it's somebody new, you don't actually know what the two of you are talking about. It's very hard to establish that we both mean the exact same thing about that word. So I know that chi is most normally translated in like a newspaper, for instance, as breath, or it's like air quality. But in martial arts, we tend to get it translated as energy. And energy is an okay translation. I just don't think it's a far enough translation. It doesn't go deeply enough into it. All energy is a result of a relationship. And so the relationship we're talking about in Qi, if you look at the Chinese character for Qi, is you've got a stove and you've got fire under the stove. And over top of the stove is a pot that's got water boiling in it for rice or millet. And the pot lid is being pushed open and there's steam coming up. That's what the picture's of. Well, that means that in order to create life energy, make rice and eat, I need wood, I need firewood, I'm going to need something to light it with. I'm going to need some kind of ignition source. I'm going to need there to be oxygen and all the other gases in the air. I'm going to have a stove so I can have the fire in it. And I'm going to have a pot and the food and the water. And I'm going to need all of these different relationships to take place in just the right way. There has to be a balance there to boil the water and make the food. And then, of course, the secret super energy they're talking about is referring to that lifting that pot lid. Because, I mean, before steam mechanics were really understood, that's magic, right? It's crazy that that could take place. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to make this steam-like energy by paying attention to a lot of different relationships in our body. So when Sifu Chen taught me, I was really lucky because I didn't really know any Chinese medicine at the time. And being a Chinese doctor, he gave me no choice in the matter. You wanted to learn Lohan, you started, studying this other thing. Because this stuff all has to intersect because we're all on the same mountain anyway, right? So if we have a good understanding that when I say the word qi, I really mean a relationship. And I suggest that anybody, seriously, you're doing a qigong of any kind, in a perfect world, if somebody says, the qi does this or the qi does that, you should be translating that into what exactly is the relationship I'm studying here, right? So like a general health qigong tells you literally nothing. It's generally studying relationships and working on them. What does that mean? Which relationships? Because the better you do something, right? If you do it 10% right, you get 10% of the benefit. You do it 70% right, you get 70% of the benefit. It's so apparent in things like martial arts like Tai Chi, right? If somebody does Tai Chi very well and they have good relationships in their body, when they do push hands, they're really hard to deal with, even though they're just normal people. But the relationships in their body and their minds is in a different place, in a different state than other people's, right? And that's the idea, is that we're trying to make our natural intrinsic state more balanced and more powerful overall. So that's like the first verbiage thing, because it's underlying everything. Hopefully that kind of makes sense, and there's not any big misunderstandings there. Does anybody have any questions about that? Blank screen. Nothing to hear. Okay, fine. So if there's no questions about qi, then the thing we should take a look at is just a quick overview of the Lohan system, and then we'll do a movement or something. I think that's the way to go. So the system itself, I wrote a little thing, I put it in the group the other day, but I'm going to briefly talk about it. The system itself came to my teacher through a Tibetan Lama who was sick in Guangzhou when my teacher was about 20, somewhere around there. He had just become a doctor. And the lineage goes back from that Tibetan Lama into Tibet. He had come to China to do some Dharma combat and go study at one of the temples. So his words were that the original time the Shaolin monastery was smashed, that some of the monks, when they ended up fleeing, growing their hair and taking off, must have made it to Tibet. And they ended up, joining a monastery, as one does, up in the middle of nowhere. And you're not going to have any political problems until the 1950s, right? So they go and they rock that, and this ended up becoming a part of the Buddhist training that they brought with them. So this theoretically means that it goes back to the Bodhidharma legend. Of course, Bodhidharma was an Indian monk who ended up coming to China. Lots of people know the story, father of Kung Fu, in quotes. But what I think people misinterpret in that story, which is important for this, is that Bodhidharma was really only said to have taught three things. He was supposed to have taught the muscle tendon change, the 18 Lohan Palm, and the bone marrow washing method. And those three things aren't that different from each other in a way. They're actually more like a spectrum of things. You start at a very yang side, and then you work toward a very yin side. Lohan Palm ends up taking the balance point, basically, between the other two extremes. The Yi Jin Jing and the bone marrow washing were pretty extreme yin and yang. And the idea of the Lohan Palm is that it's a moving qigong, a standing qigong that's not super extreme in either side. It's the balance point. So realistically, this is my own thinking, but realistically, it wasn't Kung Fu in the first place. This is actually like a tantric yoga almost, that ended up having a Chinese cultural element put onto it, because it's been around for a long time. It's been since then. So the culture is going to get involved. And the fact that the martial arts were readily available in Shaolin, where this might have been a part of, that makes sense that there's a martial arts part to the system as well. It's not big. It's a very small, very simple part of the system. It's not its main focus, because its main focus is finding balance between the mind and the body, right? The Jing, the Qi, and the Shen. The transformation of Jing, Qi, and Shen is its main kind of point of view from a like Taoist Chinese medicine kind of way to put it. So when we train it, what we're trying to do is we're trying to find various ways to balance out our body and our mind. So when we take a movement, we end up looking at every movement as though it's got various layers. And that's what we'll work on. Is the 18 Lohan Palm has a standing form, which is going to be our main practice. And that learning the form from kind of front to back, just like in something like Tai Chi, is sort of the first layer, level 1. Now you have all of the handouts and the textbook in your own possession. Layer 2 is when you start to read the textbook. So that's adding how these particular movements are done. So you start to do basic corrections. And then as you get deeper and deeper, it just starts to be different ways of thinking about the same movements. I think I'm going to demonstrate that in today's class, so that we've got an idea of a basic set of movements from the form, because it's kind of different if you've done any internal martial arts before. This one's a little bit different animal, because it's not as concerned with combat as other ones. And it'll allow us to take a couple of those movements and then layer them so you can see what I'm talking about. So if anybody has any questions, comments, or concerns now about, I don't know, lineage, history, parts of the system. I didn't really go over all the standing massages and all those other things, but it's like a Buddhist training system. Please let me know now. This is the moment to unmute yourself and go, I think you're full of crap, Neil, or whatever it might be. See, now I'm just uncomfortably waiting. Uncomfortably waiting. People are still there, right? There's still people there. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Still there. All right. Good.
I can shut up if you want.
Hi, Paul.
Sorry, my mic was being weird. Okay. So the Yijin Jing versus the 18 Lohan Palm. Does it really matter the movements between the two? Like the 18 Lohan Palm can't be done in the spicy Yijin Jing way?
Wow, way to start us at beginner questions, Paul. Good job. Who invited you anyway?
I don't know.
Oh yeah, right. That was me. Okay. You shouldn't have asked that. But yes, you can. If you look at it as it's a spectrum. Oh yeah. If you look at it as a spectrum, what you're doing is you're taking your body through every range of motion. So the idea of the I Ching Jing form is that every one of your joints moves in every way it can during the form. And then why it's the Jing Jing is because you start by doing it under tension. If you compare the I Ching Jing form or the Wei Tua form or the 18 Lohan Palm to it, one to another, you'll see that they do the same thing. All of the joints in the body all move through the same ranges. It's just the level of tension and balance around the joint that makes the difference. So the balance around the joint when people move at first is terrible. Beginners have no balance, right? So when they throw a punch, the tricep and the bicep are fighting with each other. Somebody with really nice balance around joints means that there's going to be no fight. There's going to be harmony. There's going to be as much tension on the right side of the joint or the top of the joint as the bottom of the joint. And that's what the I Ching Jing does, is that when you do it through a yang dynamic tension, you really power up through a movement that twists. It forces the joint to look at its weakest links. So it has to engage and balance itself. And then you're doing the same thing when you're doing bone marrow washing, except you're doing it from a really subtle point of view, right? Where you're pulling the joints themselves open, right? Like your bones actually pull away from each other in your elbow. And you're asking the synovial fluid to just drip down into that compact space that as it continues to be compressed, it keeps growing more and more connective tissue. But the thing is, it's a spectrum of the whole thing. It's like when we're doing Lohan, since we're talking about Lohan, what we end up doing is we do a lot of this reaching through our fingers thing. So it's actually not a bad place to start. But does that kind of answer your question, Paul? What's that, sorry?
I didn't think of the microphone. I think it very much does. I'll ask more later.
Okay, no, that's no problem. Does anybody else have any questions? As I move over to where I can move? Nobody has a question? Yeah,
So, oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Cool. So, to piggyback off of Paul's question, so then the Yi Jin Jing is contraction in a sense, and the bone marrow washing is expansion.
Yes. And they're inside, yes. Short answer, yes. Because we have other things to do, but yes. Does that make sense?
It
Because
does, yeah.
you have to have a point in between those two to create balance, or there's no balance, right? It can't happen. The balance is what's most important in the end. Real end game, that's what's up. So let's take a movement here. Let's take a movement. Just for the fun of it. Let's do the very first movement, because it's the hardest one in the form, and it's got all of the stuff in it anyway. So if I demonstrate it here, I'm standing. I'm not even going to worry about the bow or whatever in just a second. But from here, my hands are just going to come together in front of my body, and then straight up to the heart. Roll around, reach to the sky, out in front like this, like I'm giving something, and then back to my waist. Then they're going to roll up the fingertips and stand up. So if you're able to stand up and do this a couple of times, this is the way. So we're just going to run a couple of these, and then I'm going to talk about the layers. So this first layer, where I turn and my hands come up, press down. This first layer is the most obvious part of any training. Meaning right now, because you've maybe never done this move before, you're looking at it and you're seeing my hands move. And what you should be doing is copying my hands. You should be getting the hands rocking and rolling. And it should be really easy with any luck. Talk us through it one more time. So the backs of my hands come together here. Then they come straight up my center in front of my heart. So I'm kind of like a chicken wing here. And they roll over. And then they come back to my waist. And they turn over and press down. So when we do the movement, it doesn't look like much of anything until we go past that kind of first layer. So now how we actually make the body do this is we open and close the body in the front. So if I put my hands here, when I close my body, what I'm doing is I'm hinging it in the center so that it comes closer together, right? So my shoulders, my hips are closing inwards on each other like this. That's what I'm mirroring in my hands. My hands really kind of aren't doing anything in any of these movements. It's that my body is propelling them through the movement. That's how all internals work. There's no such thing as like hand moves where nothing else takes place. There's always something driving it from in behind, right? From inside the body. So here what we're doing is that my hands coming in front of my body, it's kind of like I have a big chair behind me. So I sit down into the chair. So what I'm doing is my hips are getting removed out of the way as my body closes in front and it lets my hands come together. So you can see from the side that I'm actually trying to put my hands straight from where they were, except that my hips are being removed. And because I'm sitting in the chair, I sit down, right? Well, then that means that hands coming up is me pressing the ground with my heels. That's what gives the momentum of me standing up. Then we're going to roll these over. And we're going to bring them back down to our body, and it's like we sit back down into the chair. So far, right? So far, we're hanging out, standing up, and we go sitting into the chair. And then we sort of stand up out of the chair a little bit, and roll us all over. And then we sit back down. Now, our next movement, when we turn up our fingertips, is like putting your hands on the arms of the chair, and then you push yourself back up. So there should be a feeling of like I'm pushing something with my hands, and I equalize it with my feet. So when I do this, it's exactly what my legs are doing. My knees are straightening out in relationship to me pushing on the arms of the chair. Is this making any sense? Anybody? Nobody? Silence. One more time. So Lohan moves the hands and adjusts the chi. So I'm standing. I'm going to make what's called the ox tongue palm, which is tucking your thumb in towards your like ring finger over there, just sort of as far as you can. You want to get this thumb muscle here to close over the center of the palm. That's what we're after. It has to do with how this whole thing works as a health system. So we go into Lohan Palm, right? We go into our ox tongue, and then roll back, sit in the chair. Then I push down with my feet and this lifts my arms. Then my elbows are going to pull back. My fingers are going to reach up through the ceiling, through the camera, and then back to my waist. And then my fingertips come up. And I push on the chair, stand back up. So now the form starts with 3 of these. And this is truly actually the most difficult move in the whole form. So it resides at the beginning of the form. You do 3 of them, which is always a code in Chinese martial arts. If you see anything done 3 times, especially in a row in Chinese martial arts, it's probably one of the most important moves, right? If you take a look at Tai Chi as an example, you end up with cloud hands, always repeated 3 times. You end up with how many single whips in a single form, right? It's obviously that the masters were putting something like, you need to work on this. So in this case, what they did was the first movement is a coalescent movement of everything. So it's the hardest one to get right. So you learn it first, you have the most time to practice. Okay? So now, what's going to happen healing-wise from this first movement is this contracting and expanding thing that I'm doing with my torso. What happens is that the organs in the body are like a big sack. And every time that you squeeze them, either by twisting your body or by contracting and expanding your torso, you push the organs against one another. And that is really important because the organs in our body most of the time actually are fed mainly by muscular contraction to get blood. So meaning the muscles around them have to contract in order for the blood to be pushed out. And that comes from motion. So if you're doing your Tai Chi, right, and you're twisting and turning your body, you're going to end up with this health benefit of the blood washing the organs inside you. So what we're doing in Lohan is we're trying to do the exact same thing. I'm trying to get all of the floating organs to be squished together so that the blood that's stagnant that resides within them is being pushed out like they're sponges. So I push the stagnant blood out, and then I open everything up. So this is allowing all of the new fresh blood to move back in. And that way, by the time I've done 3 of these, my whole organ system has had a good wake-up call. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense about how the body acts like a hinge in the center. Now, the other thing I was thinking we might talk about today is just some more verbiage. But before I go on, does anybody have any questions? Anybody? Unmute your mic. Give me a yes. Type me a no. Nothing. No questions. Cool. So this is the other thing I was thinking we might do. In order to get any martial art movement to work, especially in Lohan, you're going to need to have built a structure in your body, right? So with all the Chinese arts use the same words for these structures. That's why they kind of get confusing with one another. But Qi is one of those words, obviously. Dantian is another one. Hi, did we close that? Oh, I missed it. Can you read that to me, Laurie? There's a message on your phone right here. I just saw it come up. Dantian is one of these other words that we need to work on, as well as how the spinal posture works. Okay? So, Laurie's just going to grab that question for me, I think. Yeah, just there's probably a message. So, the next thing is that we need to understand what I mean by Dantian. Because Dantian gets referred to by a lot of different places, and they're always right, generally, in their own tradition. So, Dantian, the elixir field, we're going to look at it in levels and layers, just like anything else. So at first, the easiest way to look at it is that Dantian has 6 sides. And each of these sides are like physical, right? They're represented by muscle groups in your torso. So when I refer to it, I'm going to have front and back. So that's literally like my front and back, right? The muscles here. Left and right ends up kind of being obliques. And then top and bottom. Top is right under your lungs. It's right by your solar plexus, right? It's the muscularity where the top of the sac is, where the organs are in. And then the perineum is actually the bottom, so the very bottom of your hips, right in between the perineum, right in between, here and there. Yeah, you know what I mean.
John, question.
Yeah, what was the question?
Do we close the quad when sitting?
Yes, we do. Good question. When I'm sitting in this movement, both of my quads are closing. You're a Tai Chi person. So if you think about it from the quad's point of view, the quad joint is a ball joint, right? And what I'm doing is I'm actually trying to roll, here's my hands, trying to roll my ball joints towards one another when I sit down into this movement. And then when I come up and I open, I'm trying to open the ball joints as well. So this is where kind of the chair thing comes from, because it's the movement of my tailbone, right? Closing the front of the quads means that my tailbone has to retract in order for them to squeeze together. And then, I can move. And when I open my quads, it's the same thing. The whole center of my body ends up expanding through the center. And that's the standing up out of the chair versus the getting into the chair. Because on a fundamental level, and this is you can close it over your quad already. This is a practice of Qigong, where it's just the sitting down and standing back up out of it. Just using your arms as a counterbalance. You can actually sit a ways before you fall on your butt. So hopefully that makes sense out of that. Any other questions? Or should I go into Dantian a little bit? What do we think?
No more questions I can see.
Okay. Then Dantian, the 6 sides. So in order to get this totally working so that when I'm teaching the form, I can just say, turn this way, turn that way. We have to be on the same page. So let me give you this exercise. It might be really basic, but I'm going to assume that we're all beginners. So we have to kind of get our foundations together. So I just attach myself to my ribs. So my elbows are literally stuck to my rib cage here. If I just turn my hips to the left and the right, this happens. So this is basically Dantian turning left and right? So this is my horizontal action that takes place in my hips. That means that any kind of rising and falling action, it has to be that my feet are actually pressing the ground in order to make this happen. Question? T-Rex style. Yes, exactly right. So now we have our up and down, and we have our left and right. So in order to make a circle, so us to be Tai Chi people, it kind of starts as a square. It's kind of like I'm on my one side, and I turn left, and I sort of stand up to make the hands lift, and I turn right, and I kind of come down. And if I keep doing that, if I make it a really machine-like movement, then it takes out one of the hardest parts of Chinese martial arts, which is that we are constantly dealing with optical illusions with each other. Because watch what happens if I keep doing this movement and I just let my hands flow like I'm a Tai Chi guy. Now you know my arms aren't, because if I close them, they're not. The rotation in my palms gives the illusion that everything is rotating. So what ends up happening is beginners do this, and they roll their arms around rather than actually move their center. You know what I mean? Their dance can't make it happen. So in order to get all of the Lohan movements to work, when we end up doing the form, Dantian is constantly moving. And it actually wants to be, in a perfect world, we get all 6 sides of Dantian cultivated. Once that happens, it can move in 360 degrees. But it's not a specialty, like for almost any style, I don't think. Because everybody's kind of got their thing, right? Like everybody does the 6 sides, but they specialize in 1 or 2 of them. IGP, for instance, tends to have super powerful left and rights. This is something Tai Chi really masters. Whereas Bagua has this weird tipping thing that it's really good at that almost nobody else does. So the thing is that they're all pointing at the same central point of view, the central principle that all movement must ripple from the dantian out through the body. So by controlling everything from here, making this our origin point of movement, we end up with this cascade of events that ends up taking place when we do the form. So hopefully that lines up or makes some sense of something you may have heard before, never heard before, but it means that we're trying to always go a layer deeper than you first see, right? Meaning, you know, a hand move, if I'm doing Tai Chi Chuan guys, so if I'm doing my lazy bow tie and coat, I should realize that if I close my fist, sweet nothing's happening here in my arm, but it sure looks like something's going on. That's the trick, right? Is that this stuff is extremely hard to pick out when you haven't had something, you know, make any sense of it for you. So, unless there's any questions, comments, concerns, criticisms, right now, I think we should start the form. Questions? History, verbiage, dantian, anything thus far? I'm not getting a lot of feedback from you guys. Feedback. Give me some feedback. No one. All right. I am that good a teacher that it makes complete sense. We will carry on. So let's do the form then. Okay. So it begins. Give yourself enough room that you can like move your hands. So my feet are together. I'm gonna settle into what's called Wu Ji. So Wu Ji literally is supposed to mean before the separation of yin and yang. So I'm actually trying to get all of my weight into the center between my feet. I'm actually not even trying to get like this. I'm trying to become like a single pillar. So my feet are together, my ankles are touching, my knees are touching, and then my hands on my sides, basically standing at attention actually. Yeah. Now, I soften my knees and ankles and settle the body. So this is the moment where you do stand tall like the monkey. Quickly over it, I'm sure everybody here knows it already, but stand tall like the monkey is when you try to remove some of the curvature of your lower back. So you tuck your tailbone under very slightly, as though you're putting your lower back against the wall behind you. And you tuck in the chin and open up the back of your neck like you're being pulled on from above, or like you're listening to somebody behind you, like you heard something. So this open neck and dropped tailbone puts the spine into traction. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to get enough of a spinal pillar there that when we start moving and manipulating it, that it's a real central post for anything to touch. Anything that touches that central post, we can spin with it, right? Be it my intention or a goal. Okay, so here I am, standing tall like a monkey. Now, the first movement is I pick up my thumbs, as I'm just doing this. And then my thumbs kind of peel open my hands. So they lead the movement. And what's happening in my heart, which is the most important, is that my heart is actually rolling backwards and it's stretching my nipples apart. So it's this opening movement we just talked about. So I push my feet into the ground, my heart rolls backward, my thumbs come out and peel open my hands until my hands are facing the sky. Then they rise. So my heart's still kind of up here, facing the sky. And then I'm going to get them into the prayer position, and then I settle the whole body from my ankles upwards, down an inch or two, until my hands are on my heart. So you can see that my thumbs stay out. So when they come up over the head, your thumbs should actually like brush your nose on the way by. And then you're looking for this position, the thumbs touching the heart, and everything sort of nice and straight, 90 degrees. Now the bow is like starting at the top of your spine and moving one vertebrae at a time. So I open up the very top of my neck and I go all the way down through the C's. When I get to Da Jue, the big C7 in the back, everything in the upper back starts to go.
and I continue all the way down until I've moved my whole spine from the top to the bottom. Now at 90 degrees, right parallel to the ground, I tuck in my tailbone, tuck in my knees and my ankles, and I settle my tailbone back underneath me, and I'm going to stand up from the bottom of my spine to the top. So I'm doing the exact same thing in reverse. So I should have top of the spine to the bottom, and then bottom of the spine to the top. So I end up doing this waveform all the way down and then all the way back up. From here, my hands drop until they want to come apart. So you try to keep them together until probably your solar plexus, and then the bottom will want to open up. So instead of letting it open, you bring your fingertips forward so they stay together, and then you bring it all the way down. So now I make a diamond over my dantian. So my navel is actually right in underneath my thumbs here. Palms touch my body, and then you massage the belt meridian, which is on the navel line, right? So I just massage across there and let my hands rest. This would be when we would step out to start the form. So let's just do it one more time. Make sure that I really have it off to you here. So I'm in Muji. I settle my body. Fingers reach to the ground. Thumbs open up. Peel open by opening the chest. Once the hands reach the sky, push the heels into the ground. Stand up. Hands come into prayer position. Heels and body start to settle. Pull down. This brushes the nose and comes to the heart. Then the top of my spine starts to bend to the bottom. Then bending the knees, tuck the tailbone, bottom of the spine up to your top. And now settle everything down. Fingertips come forward. And then open on the diamond. And then we just brush the belt meridian. So now all my weight goes into my right foot. So I actively bring all of my weight to my right side and I lift left knee up, just like Tai Chi. And I touch it down without any weight. This is, I got corrected a lot on this one, actually. What was that question, Lauren? I missed it.
Prayer position. Should we be praying to someone or something each time? No.
No. That's it.
It's just a hand posture.
For now, no. That gets into like you're doing Buddhist training. So remember I was saying it's kind of like layers, right? The prayer position thing, first of all, is body structure. It's reference points for how I'm moving and where I'm moving. Second layer is where you might have an intention. So like I think in the last one I said stuff like pull down from above, which is one of the intentions. And so you had something that you were actually trying to pull from above, from the sky, down to your heart. Later on, if you wanted to get into the Buddhism side of it, then prayer in Buddhism isn't what prayer is in monotheism, right? It's not like actively praying to a god or a deity. It's more of an action of looking at yourself, a certain aspect of yourself, and paying it some reverence. So in this case, what we're really sort of bowing to is the Lohan. How hard are we pressing our hands? What was that one?
How hard are we pressing our hands together?
Ah,
Is it, how much pressure?
very little pressure. It might look like I'm pressing, but I'm not really pressing very hard. I don't have any real power. What you're bowing to here is the fact that this is the 18 Lohan form. The 18 Lohan represent, they're actually part of a dream guy had. But what they represent is that every one of the different 18 Lohan, if you look at their images, they all have completely different images. They're riding deers or elephants, or their mouth is wide open, or one hand in the air, or very, very different looking postures. And the idea is that they're showing the 84,000 doors of the Dharma, meaning that all of these 18 people made enlightenment in totally different ways. The guy sitting on the elephant is reading sutras. He did it by understanding sutras, whereas some people do it through experiential training. So what we're bowing to essentially is ourselves. It's just like all Buddhism. When you bow to a Buddhist statue, it's not Sid you're bowing to. You're bowing to that aspect of yourself. You're respecting the fact that you could be better refined.
So what I'm doing here is I'm saying I'm trying to refine myself all the way to be like a Lohan, like a super enlightened dude. And that's about it. I'm bringing in all of that right now. Unless you want to go further into the religious aspects of the Buddhist stuff, but it's probably not the thing to do at the beginning. Okay? Okay. So where was I? We were here. So once I put the diamond and I relax, and I put all my weight into my right leg, my left foot steps up and out, and I place it down without any weight whatsoever. Like you're standing on a frozen pond, and you're not sure the ice is going to hold. So you just kind of touch the ice, everything's cool, then you bring your weight over. I got corrected on this a lot of times, because what this is it's a show of control. Because everything in this form is about balance between extremes, right? You learn the I Ching and the super, super hard kung fu stuff, and you get the yang extreme. You learn the bone marrow washing and super weird meditation practices where you're just literally sitting still and being in your own head. That's the yin extreme. The idea is that this is the founding of the center, right? We have to find the real extremes to find the center of anything. It's always about range, right? Anyway, so it's really important that this is totally under control. There is no falling. Because in Lohan, we fall on purpose. There's a move where you fall, but it's not because you're not thinking about it, okay? So this first movement, very controlled. I settle into my body and I sink to the center. Okay. Now, our ox tongue palms. In fact, we'll just do the move. Our ox tongue palms close, right? And now we do Lohan moves with hands and adjust the chi 3 times. So I settle back into my easy chair. My hands come together. My heels press the ground and I stand back up. Everything lifts. Hands come through. And then everything kind of settles back down. I go sit back in the chair. And then my fingertips come up. That's just a rotation. There isn't a lift here. It's just a rotation of hands. Press down on the sides of the chairs. So we reach through our fingers. I try to make my fingers as long as possible. Like I'm reaching under the couch for my keys and I only need my arm to be an inch longer. And I stand up. My fingertips keep reaching right through my body. And they reach right through to the heavens. They reach through my wall. And then my fingertips touch the ground and drag furrows in the dirt like I'm planting a garden. Then my fingertips come up and I press down, and that stands me up as I press my heels in. Last one, so we've got 3 of these. So I'm inhaling here. Then this is all exhalation. I'm standing up and I'm exhaling, reaching through my fingertips, still exhaling, exhaling out of my mouth and exhaling. Very, very gently, all the way to here. Here, my fingertips come up and this is my inhalation moment. So I breathe in, and then I breathe out as I would be standing up. So there's always a control of breath inside of Lohan. There's another layer there. And there's always an idea of pressure. So the idea behind this thing, kind of giving you guys a shotgun at some of this stuff today. This whole thing is that the idea being Lao Gong, the work palace, center of the palm, right, where work takes place, is one of the places that we actually emit chi. We emit body heat all the time. And this system, one of the reasons you can tell it's old, when Sifu Chen started teaching me the medicine stuff, he goes, how did he tell it? Oh yeah, he goes, okay, there's 12 meridians and there's 8 extraordinary meridians, right? Yeah, Sifu, yeah, I got that, sure, the 8 extraordinary, 12. This is the 6 meridian system this is based on. So in the year 1000, traditional Chinese medicine as we know it was codified in Beijing. That's when they took the different aspects of it, because before then, it was broken into pieces. There were herbalists and acupuncturists, and they wouldn't necessarily be the same person. Bone setters, right? Bone setter people were actually the Kung Fu guys, because we were the people that you would go to if you fell off your roof and broke your arm, because we knew how to set arms back into place. You would have blind people who would be the Anwang masseuse people who would take care of relaxation massage, essentially, so blind people had a job. And then you had the Tui Na people, right? The acupressure people, the Chinese massage that feels like you want to die when somebody does it to you. Yeah, but it works really well. So in the year 1000, those got codified. At the same time, what they ended up doing is they codified all of these different systems of thought, and they came to the conclusion that there was the 12 meridians and the 8 extraordinary meridians as well. The 6 meridians is the 12 meridians. It's just an older version of them where the upper and lower meridians connect to each other. And that's where the idea that all of this is based on comes from. So here's the vibe. If you were to have a bunch of crap in the gutters of your house, you know, the rain gutters on the roof, you have a bunch of leaves in there. When it rains and you want to have some flow, it ends up that if you have too much garbage in there, that the water doesn't flow well. So if we clean the garbage out, we're going to have better flow, right? So one way to do it is to get in there and like grab everything and pull it all out. Reminds you you're still alive for now. Thanks, James. It's exactly what it feels like. Yes, I am fully alive because this hurts. So the way that you clean out gutters that you can't get at, because we can't get at our meridians, which are these gutter systems, these places where water runs. What we end up doing is we create pressure. If we were to take a really big garden hose and we were to put it in that gutter and blow all of this water at high pressure through it, eventually the leaves and gunk would come out, right? And that's the idea. So when I close Laogong, this is a normal leakage point. Normally, there's qi that kind of comes out of here. So by closing it up, that qi's got nowhere else to go but back into the system, stays in the system, which means now there's a little pressure. So when you close the tongue to the roof of the mouth, another one of the big Qigong lessons, right? You bring your tongue just up to in behind the upper palate, which you do in this form. That's another one of the gates that you're allowing flow to increase through the body, and now you've closed it so there's more pressure. There's other ones in your feet, and then there's different ones inside your joints. But the idea here is that we create a whole bunch of pressure in the body. And as we do these movements, we get the qi to flow, so to speak. So when I end up with this nice, easy flow of high pressure water, all of the gunk, all of the stagnation, the meridians is kind of getting moved. And then in the middle of the form, twice in the form, the middle of the form and at the end of the form, you actually open up and you blow the pressure out. You let the pressure off. Meaning I've gotten all the leaves going and all the gunk is happening. And then I open up like Laogong, I open up Gong Trend, and the leaves get blown out. The stagnant qi gets blown away. So that's kind of the idea here. There's a set of locks and gates in Lohan. Locks are things that you put on gates. So this is the gate that lets the energy qi out, right? The flow comes out of there. So I lock it up so that the pressure increases. Hopefully that makes sense. Because there's a feeling of pressure inside this form that you may notice. But I'm going to kind of shotgun some of the medicine at you, some of the movements at you at the same time, because why not? This speaking. Oh, James is asking a really complicated question. We're not going to mess with right now. So yeah, I think that was about whether it was for heart and pericardium or different things. But that's way past what we're doing. So let's look at the move one more time, okay? My tongue on the roof of the mouth. Standing tall like the monkey. My feet together. Laogong is closed. I've got all of the gates sort of closed here. And then I start my form. So I'll peel open my hand, open up my chest. So what I'm trying to do is get flow to take place, right? I push up into the sky. Kind of like you're grabbing something from above and you pull down to the heart. We bow from the top of the spine to the bottom. And then from the bottom of the spine to the top. Then the hands are going to roll down the body. As soon as they want to part, we bring the fingers forward. Open them up into the diamond on the dantian. Press the bell meridian. All the way to the right leg. Step out to the left, shoulder width. And then center yourself. Close the Laogong. So then moving the hands and adjusting the chi 3 times. Reach through your fingers, inhale to here. Reaching through the fingers the whole time. These are active movements. So my arm is trying to get longer constantly. Stand back up on the chair. Reaching through the fingers. Withdraw, sit into the chair. Press the ground with the feet, fingers stay long. Reach right through your own heart. Through your head, through the sky, through the wall. Reach through the floor. Back to my body. Fingertips turn up, I inhale. I exhale to descend. Okay, so that's number 2. So now the third one has a little bit different one. It's a little different change. Because now we're in the, so everything's the same. I'm still reaching through my fingertips. This would all be exhaling. Now this form, this last third one ends here. It doesn't have the press up because we stay in the chair. Okay. So does anybody have any questions to there? Since I'm not getting a whole bunch of feedback, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. Any questions, comments, concerns, criticisms, sarcasms? Random comments, nothing. Everybody's happy. That's okay. I don't mind getting a drink of water. That doesn't hurt me. I'm just noticing the time, and I don't want to go too far because I don't want to kind of blow everybody's mind. Is there anything in particular you'd like to talk about now? What haven't I told you? The whole system consists of a bunch of different parts. There's the standing form, which I can probably just like keep doing while I'm waiting for questions. There's a standing form, which is this thing. There's a seated form, which is the same form, done slightly differently. And then,
How would you do that movement with those deer horn knives? Go ahead, show them.
who was that?
James.
Shut up, James. How would you do what movement? This one? I'd only do it on you. Sorry, that's the answer. Yeah, that's a great movement with your horn knives. Good idea. So it's got standing form, sitting form. It has 3 separate massage routines that are done standing, that are done after the standing forms. And then it's got kind of 3 different routines on the floor. A couple of massage routines. Well, the Sifu called it like the support routine. And then there's a very yoga-like stretching routine. Then you've got all of the work on Buddhist theory.
What is the importance of the thumb brushing the nose?
That's a good question. Yeah.
Andrew Montero.
Good point. I almost never even talk about that. So, like I said at the beginning, Sifu Chen was a doctor, right? So I get there, I'm this young guy, and I'm not getting doctored. Everybody else in the club is. So what Sifu would tell me, he'd like pull me out of class, hang out with him and have tea, and he'd say, watch this guy's form, watch this guy's form. He'll say, you can see it's a diagnostic. Because you can see whether or not someone's balanced in this form really fast. So the very first one he taught me was the bow. If you ask somebody to do this and have their fingers brush their nose, and then tell them to close their eyes. Lots of people, and I mean like more than should have this happen, will do stuff like this. They'll come right down beside their head. They don't even know where the center of their body is. So Chinese medicine is all based on yin yang. Balance is balance is balance. If you want to have a balanced, healthy body, you need to have good balance. Literally, like standing on one leg kind of balance. When Sifu Chen used a herbalist most of the time, he didn't do acupuncture as much as torturing with his fingers and herbs. But literally, when he was sitting doing his herbalism, he's teaching me mixing herbs on one leg. He standing for like 20 minutes on each side. And I asked him about it eventually because I see him, get to some stupid amount of time, 1 foot on the ground, and then he starts doing stuff like this. And he's moving his foot around while he works. And I asked him, I'm like, hey, what Kung Fu is this? And he says, balance is balance is balance. the better my actual balance, like stand on one leg balance, the more healthy my body becomes. And when you diagnose somebody, you can watch all of this move, especially this whole thing from bow to here, because it has a center line. And people who do not know where their center line is end up with some kind of a disbalance inside their bodies. Now, to not be specific about it, quite literally, you can just look at yourself in the mirror or like film yourself with your eyes closed. You have to do it with your eyes closed. You have to be honest, right? You don't try to hit the center. Close your eyes and see if you do. But then, because that is true, that balance is balance, you can actually self-correct. So it doesn't matter what it means if my hands are here or here. This might be this meridian, this might be this, who cares? What matters is that it wasn't in the middle. So if you continually practice to be in the middle, then you're going to be able to slowly bring yourself into this idea of balance. Because there's lots of ways to look at balance. In fact, we might even have another, let me give you one more little thing.
Is there an intent you should have as we do the routine? Okay.
Is there an intention we should have while we do the routine? Yes.
And Declan has these. And
So the intention at first, other than like, do the move, should be that you're trying to make your fingers longer. So let me teach you this. This is the static Qigong. So remember, this is a Shaolin system, right? It's a whole bunch of Shaolin that references it. So this Qigong, I'll teach you this one. Hopefully you can see that. Yeah, cool. This is the posture. Now, I'm not 180 degrees though, right? If I turn sideways, you can see I'm actually forward almost 45 degrees. Okay, I'm not all the way open because I'm trying to make my shoulders stiff. If you bring your shoulders to 180 degrees, what'll happen is it'll pull itself right up out of the cup. So if I come forward, you'll see it, it'll drop right there. Drops into the spot, about 45-ish degrees, 35-ish degrees. Palms down, fingertips out, fingertips spread apart. So this posture, you can read that to me, Laura. So this posture is exactly the same as what we're doing in low. I'm trying to make my arm longer, literally.
secret to this is whose foot he's standing on. Is it theirs or the patient's?
So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to reach out, like I'm trying to literally make my arm longer. So as I try to make my arm longer to the side, that means I'm trying to open the joints. I'm actually trying to make the space in my elbow grow. I'm trying to make this bigger. I'm trying to make the space in my wrist actually bigger. Now, at first you might feel in your shoulder or your elbow. Eventually you should be able to get your wrist, maybe even your fingertips. What you're doing is you're doing both of these hands at the same time. So I'm reaching two directions at once to get started. And I'm trying to get this to become, it should be, I was going to say natural, but it's not really natural. When you do this, you should probably feel bad. All Qigong sort of feel bad usually. At least when I know, I'll kind of feel bad. There's a feeling when you start to open the joints inside, as your elbow pulls apart, that the connective tissue will hold it together. But your nerve endings are only a certain length. So when you pull it apart and it actually happens, you'll pull on your nerve endings and it usually feels sort of like a tingling or a fire. It's kind of like not pleasant. Not unpleasant, not pleasant. You can tell something's being stretched. Over time, your nerve ending, if you do this a lot, will grow. Because the body always evolves under stress, right? But at first, this is sort of an unpleasant Qigong, so people tend to stop it early, and they should. What happens is when you open up that joint, that space in your joint, the synovial fluid will go in there. And that is the stuff, that gel that goes in there, is the stuff that connective tissue is like made out of. And our connective tissue is the whole network, the fascic suit that we end up trying to make do work. Because our connective tissue allows our muscles to pull on our bones, tendons and ligaments, right? But what's interesting about it, this is why the I Ching is a thing, is say I have, 100 units of force in my tricep to do this. But if my connective tissue can only handle 50 units of force when it pulls, it will only throw 50 units of force. My mind, my brain will not let it go past that. You have to train yourself to do that. Bodybuilders do it a lot and they rip the tendons off their bones. So what Kung Fu people do is the opposite. We don't look at strength as muscular strength. We look at it as the delivery of muscular strength. So if I can do 100 units of power, I would like all of that to get to the end of my arm. But that relies on my connective tissue. And what's really neat about connective tissue is the body is made up of way more of it than people think. It's almost like 3 to 1. Muscle fibers, three connective tissue fibers to a muscle fiber. They wrap all around every muscle fiber at a 3 to 1 ratio. So if you end up having even some of your connective tissue start to want to grow and become thicker by doing this, because I'm putting that pressure on it to do so, I'm asking my body to do work and making it evolve. It will evolve to this. So then what ends up happening is all of the connective tissue in your body gets engaged. It can't thicken one part in your elbow. The body just shoots out the proteins and everything that it needs to make more tendons, and more tendons get made. It's part of the muscle tendon chain, right? So this reaching through the joints is actually a piece of the Yi Jing Jing that you find inside of this motion. Because in the beginning of the form, I'm doing this technique, but I'm doing it while close to one arm, while I roll my joints in my arm. So I'm reaching through my fingertips, or I'll do it again, so I reach through my fingertips, and I don't stop, but as I'm reaching, my joints are rotating as they're opening. My joints are rotating as they're opening. So I'm asking all of the connective tissue inside of here to move in a three-dimensional way and be pulled on and annoyed until it starts to evolve to become stronger and better. So like health-wise, this ends up being the thing that helps you with your arthritis, the thing that helps you with your discs, because more connective tissue is better for you, right? If we end up with our connective tissue becoming unhealthy or becoming lacking, we get weaker and weaker and weaker as we get older. But again, there's 3 times as much connective tissue as there is muscle. So even if you lose muscle mass as you get older, you can steep yourself in this connective tissue thing, and your strength versus power ratio will change. Hopefully that makes some sense. So that is called the eagle. This is an eagle claw Qigong. This is from Eagle System. So I'm reaching through out to my fingertips on both sides, settling into the body. And when I was training, when I trained this one, my teacher made us do it up to 20 minutes at a time. I don't recommend you do 20 minutes at a time unless you really hate the way your arms feel when they feel good. If you like making them feel bad for a long period of time, this works. But the results are uncanny. So just to reiterate how to do it properly, because I don't think I said this. I don't think I said this. It's all about the shoulder. Your shoulder blades must be pulled towards your back pockets of your pants. If the shoulder blades are pulled outwards, so if I do this, and you can see my shoulder reach out of the socket, then I'm actually ripping my shoulder apart. And I'm disconnecting from the rest of my arm, nothing's good. So I have to keep my shoulder down by pulling my shoulder blades from here, right? This is terrible, to there. So they're both pulling downwards while this apparatus presses outwards. So you end up, this is why it's actually called Eagle Kung Fu. Actually, I don't think I've ever taught that very often. The big thing in Eagle is it's got wings. And the wings work by your shoulder blades pulling downwards and your arms going outwards, right? Those are the 2 forces that they say the eagle uses to fly. At least that's how the Shaolin interprets it. So you've got this force and this force at the same time. So that's Eagle Claw Qigong. And it's the same Qigong that we end up doing moving for a lot of the low life. It's one of the ways you can layer yourself with it. So does anybody have any questions? Covered the bow, we've covered the first movement, we covered the Eagle Claw Qigong. Questions, comments, concerns? Talk to me, people, while I grab my water.
I think that was well explained, Neil. Thank you very much. That was a good, excellent start. Thank you.
Great, no problem. I'm glad I hope it's making sense.
Yeah, definitely does.
Cool, that's great. So, does anybody have any questions as all before we kind of wrap things up? What's that? Oh, that's a good idea. My wife says I should do an overview. So, homework-wise, ideally you guys now will practice the things we just practiced, right? The bow and the Lohan moves hands 3 times. And maybe the eagle claw gong if you have the time. The rest of the form, if you've done martial arts before, is pretty straightforward. And I'll post videos of the form. So feel free, everybody, to just try to learn it. Because we're going to see each other, and then I can correct anything that's like totally out of whack, right? So that you don't end up with bad habits. But right now, if you guys work on the set and you try to just learn the choreography, then we're going to have a lot to work with. Because like I said, forms are kind of like handing out a textbook to somebody page by page, right? So once you've got each of the pages, then it's all about reading. So the faster we get those pages, the better. Because I know we only have 10 weeks. And in my perfect world, what we're going to be able to cover is at least the movements of the form. But that's really less important to me than the principles of it. If you can get some of these principles working, then the form will start to take effect, right? And then as you move forward through it, even if you just learn the choreography, you know how these principles must be applied, right? So like this eagle claw gong, reaching through the joints, it happens most of the time in the form. It becomes a normal sort of natural way of doing things. Same as how the quads close and open, right? The dantian rolls back and forth. Those are the principles that are always underlying what's happening. Consistently, it never stops. And then it's got its own weirdness, its own flavor, you know, because it's not quite like Tai Chi. Tai Chi has a thing where it's expanding most of the time. And actually, Lohan's the opposite. It's usually contracting. It's kind of weird. Like it's sort of yin yang backwards to it, which makes it interesting, right? Because it still just lends more balance to the whole idea. So as we move through the course, my hope is that you guys will get the basics of the Shaolin Tai Fa, which is the massage routine stuff, the standing stuff. We'll definitely do the seated stuff, and we should have most of, if not all of the form in 10 weeks, so that we'll have the whole kind of base layer. But then if people are interested, then we can continue on into the more deeper stuff. Like we had a couple questions today about Buddhism already. We can talk about that end of it. I haven't even talked about the meditation stuff. There's a whole meditation Buddhism practice too. It was taught to me last. Like it was like physicality, right? Bring the Jing together, right? Make the substrate of the body, accurate, and then understand what the principles are, which is the Shen of the mind. Once the principles kind of make sense, then it's the mind and the body working together to make Qi, right? Because it's relationships of mind and body. And when people start martial arts, they tend to be mind and body in different places. Usually their body's here and their mind's in the internet, right? And then they start practicing, and then their mind and their body end up in the same place. And then at higher level, what you're trying to do is you're trying to then separate mind and body again, which is sort of what the third level of the Lohan training is, which is just meditation. Because originally, this is exactly what Sifu Chen told me. It was originally, this was meant as a system for monks to stay healthy for meditation. It had nothing to do with martial arts. It had nothing to do with anything else. It was just, you're a human being. And as a human being, that means this is your vehicle to do the work. So if you're going to do this hard work of becoming a Buddha, of becoming enlightened, trying to evolve yourself in a positive way anymore, you got to stay alive. And you got to not be, suffering because everything in your body hurts because you don't exercise or whatever it might be. So these exercises got created as an effort to support a meditation routine. So like the last thing maybe I'll mention is that there is the system, when you have the whole system, it's meant to be like if you're a monk and have nothing else to do with your life, then you can do the whole system daily. But it takes like 2.5 hours or something, because it's in every day the routine would include 3 meditations, of a half hour each. So that's an hour and a half meditation plus the other stuff, right? But what I was told is it was literally the first thing in the morning. Like get up in the morning, you do your Lohan stuff, then you would go to breakfast, right? Because you get up at 5, breakfast is at 7, and then your Buddhist monk day continues. I've done it for a few weeks. I've never done it for like years, not the whole system, because it's so many hours a day. But it's interesting when it all works together. It was the first time when I did how long did I do that? I think the first time I did it was probably 100 days. It might have been, I keep thinking, my mind's saying it was 150. It might have been more. But by the time you've done the whole system for like 3 months,
I know in my mind, it was like, oh, okay, some of the Shaolin legends are sort of viable now. Those guys probably were really serious if they did nothing but this all the time, right? They would have had a lot of mind power, a lot of physicality, and they all would have been kind of like undertaken into the right place, right? It would have coalesced really well. Anyway, so if anybody has any other comments, concerns, this is the moment. Or you can always message me. You can always write in here, or you can message me on Facebook, on the Facebook group. If you have any questions, I'll always be able to get back to you. That's no problem. So, questions? Is that it? Are we done? What do we think, everybody?
All good, thank you.
All right. Ian, anybody else? Anybody got something to say before we call it a day?
All good.
Ian has nothing to say. Very nice. Cool. All right, guys. Well, if you have anything to say, comment, throw it in either the Zoom or throw it to me on the Facebook group. Practice the exercises we did today, and I'll if I haven't already, I'll make sure that there's a copy of the form up on the group for you guys to just watch, and feel free to learn as much of it as you can. All right, everybody. Excellent class.
Thank you very much.
Very nice. Good stuff, guys.
Thank you.
Take care.